All right, y'all, clock out mentally and pull up a chair. Welcome to the broken shift, where the codes are emotional, the tea is hot, and the trauma, oh, it's charted, just not processed. Imagine you're declared dead, your body prepped, your organs scheduled for donation, your family notified, but you're not dead. Not yet. That's what almost happened to a man in Kentucky. And the only reason he's alive today? A nurse.
This episode isn't fiction. This isn't a thriller script. This is real. A man nearly had his organs harvested while he was still alive, and a nurse said, "Something's not right." She spoke up, she stopped the process, and in doing so, she saved his life.
We're going to walk through this story piece by piece. The system breakdown, the lack of communication, the silence around death determination protocols, and the brave nurse who trusted her instinct.
This episode is about listening to that inner voice. It's about the danger of hierarchy in medicine, and it's about the incredible responsibility nurses carry, not just for care, but for truth.
Because this nurse, she challenged the system. She risked her job, but she didn't let someone get buried alive.
This is The Broken Shift. And today we're asking, what happens when the people who say he's gone are wrong?
Let's talk about what happened. According to the report, the man whose name has not been publicly released was brought into a Kentucky hospital after being found unconscious. His condition was critical. He had suffered a drug overdose.
EMS resuscitated him en route. He was placed on life support. And then he was declared brain dead. That's when things moved quickly. Organ procurement agencies were notified. Preparation began for harvesting his organs, but something didn't sit right with one of the nurses on duty.
She noticed subtle signs, a twitch, a breath pattern, eye movement, maybe small, maybe fleeting, but there, and instead of ignoring it, she did what so many are afraid to do in high-pressure moments. She spoke up.
She raised concern. She questioned the call. And even as others pushed back, even as the transplant process was already underway, she held the line.
A second exam was ordered, more monitoring, and wouldn't you know it, that man wasn't brain dead. He was improving. He eventually woke up.
Let that sink in. This man, who was about to be harvested, came back because one nurse said, "Hold on."
We need to talk about what that means, not just medically, but ethically, legally, and emotionally, especially for the nurse who intervened, because she didn't just save a life, she exposed a flaw in a system we're told to trust without question.
And we'll break that down in part 2.
So let's start with this. What does it mean to be brain dead? Because brain death is not a coma, it's not a vegetative state, it's legal death irreversible. Cessation of all brain activity. In most states and countries, once brain death is declared, you're considered deceased under the law.
But here's the catch. Determining brain death isn't always simple. It involves specific testing, reflexes, respiratory drive, pupil response, apnea testing, neurologic evaluation by trained physicians.
And even then, the guidelines can vary. Different hospitals, different documentation requirements, different checklists. So it begs the question, if brain death isn't consistently verified, how many calls are made too soon?
That's why what this nurse did matters so much, because she saw what the testing missed. Or maybe what no one was willing to recheck.
Now let's layer in the pressure. Once organ procurement gets involved, there's a rhythm, a protocol. There's urgency because organ viability depends on timing. Minutes matter.
That pressure, it's real, and it can cloud judgment. Not because people are evil, but because the machine is moving fast and sometimes too fast to catch its own error.
So when this nurse raised her hand and said, wait, she wasn't just pausing a process. She was putting herself on the line. She was going up against a system that often sees questioning as defiance.
And that brings us to the deeper truth. Nurses aren't just caregivers. We're gatekeepers, advocates, witnesses. And sometimes, we're the last safeguard between a mistake and a miracle.
And that miracle happened because she trusted her gut.
And we're going to talk more about that, the emotional toll of being the voice in the room that says stop, in part 3.
Here's something we don't talk about enough, the emotional cost of speaking up, of going against the grain, of being the only one in the room to say, not yet.
That nurse, she saved a life. But what happened after the adrenaline faded? After the relief? Did anyone come up to her and say thank you? Or did they look the other way?
Because often the system doesn't reward bravery, it punishes disruption, even when disruption saves a life.
There's a kind of silence that follows whistleblowers and interrupters. The kind that isolates you, makes you second guess, wonder if you'll be targeted next, wonder if you'll be the one left off the schedule, or mysteriously reassigned.
We've seen it happen. Nurses who call out unsafe staffing, question medication orders, refuse to send home a suicidal patient. What they get in return: cold shoulders, HR meetings, exit interviews.
But you know what else they carry? The knowing that somebody is still alive, still walking, still breathing, because they didn't back down.
That knowing? That's sacred.
So if you're listening right now and you've ever raised your voice and been made to feel small, let this episode be your reminder.
You did the right thing.
Even if no one else ever says it, we're saying it right here, right now.
Coming up in part 4, we'll dig into how hospitals can build systems that support this kind of advocacy instead of punishing it.
And why we need nurse-led ethics boards, escalation protocols, and protections for those who dare to speak truth in critical moments.
Okay, let's stop asking, how did she know? And start asking, why wasn't she supported? Because that's the next layer, not just celebrating nurses who speak up, but building systems that expect them to.
And protect them when they do. That means safeguards. That means structure. That means nurse-led ethics boards with real power, not just a checkbox committee that meets once a quarter.
It means clearly written escalation protocols where any nurse can hit pause if something doesn't sit right without fear of retaliation or being labeled insubordinate.
It means having backup. Not just a chain of command, but a chain of courage. People in every role who are trained to stop, reassess, and listen when someone says wait.
Because systems don't just fail from bad people, they fail from silence, from speed, from deference to hierarchy instead of deference to human life.
We need more trauma-informed leadership in hospitals. We need nurse advisors embedded in end-of-life decision teams. We need second opinion requirements on brain death diagnoses, especially in time-sensitive organ procurement cases.
And we need something we talk about all the time here: culture change.
The kind of culture that sees questioning as a strength, not a threat.
And if we don't build that, if we don't institutionalize that level of advocacy, then every nurse who speaks up will still be out there alone.
And the next life saved might not be.
Coming up in our final part, we talk about what we owe to the ones who spoke up and those who never got the chance.
And why advocacy is more than a moment, it's a legacy.
So what do we owe the nurse who said stop? We owe her more than applause, more than a viral headline. We owe her protection, structure, solidarity, and a seat at the table.
Because advocacy isn't just something you do in the moment. It's something that echoes after, in policy and culture, in the way nurses are treated when they speak up.
And we don't just owe that to her, we owe it to the ones who never got the chance, who were silenced, who were ignored, who saw something and said nothing because the risk was too high.
This episode, it's about what happens when one voice cuts through the noise and says the uncomfortable truth.
And the next one, it's about what happens when that voice doesn't belong to a woman but a man. Because in July 2023, nurse Brad Rathke of Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle was stabbed in the jaw with a metal butter knife by a patient.
And he's not alone. Allison Smith, a nurse from the same hospital, was punched in the face by a patient less than a year into the job. 2 different nurses, same hospital, same problem.
Male nurses are at risk too, and the violence, it doesn't discriminate, it escalates, and it gets covered up.
Episode 6 is going to pull back the curtain on workplace violence, not just against women, but against all nurses.
And what's really being done to stop it.
Until then, if you've ever witnessed something like this, if you've ever spoken up and felt the backlash, or stayed silent and carried the guilt, we see you.
Share this episode, follow at the Bedside Rebel, submit your story anonymously, be part of the movement. This is The Broken Shift, where we believe
Nursing shouldn't break you.